Andrew, final pre-election essay column coming out imminently. What I love about it is because you're one of few optimists in the country.
I'm possibly the only optimist in this building or any other building in central London.
So if we start with the positive, you do think there's going to be a Labour government, but we're just not sure of the majority yet. But a sizable one. A
sizable majority, 100 plus.
OK.
I'm not going to say any more than that. I think there are too many moving parts at this stage. But I think it's going to be a proper big majority. And I think there are a few things that we haven't in the media concentrated on enough. And one is the Liberal Democrats. I think particularly because Labour have pulled out of so many seats across the south and given them a free run at a time when the country's mood is more anti-conservative than it's pro-anything. Yeah. I think it's likely that the Lib Dems will come back with quite a large number of seats. Shall we say 50? Shall we even say 60? Who knows? Now, if that happens, and you look at the Lib Dem manifesto, it is well to the left of Labour on, the public services, spending on the NHS, on social care, on taxation, and, if you think this is a left-right issue, and on Europe as well. Now, I can see a future in which that big block of Lib Dem MPs makes common cause with a big block of Labour MPs, slightly dissident to the Starmer project, and then we see some fun in the House of Commons. In other words, I think there is going to be pressure from the left as well as from the right on the Starmer government.
I mean, already we've seen, though, haven't we, that very visible commitment to social care, particularly from the Lib Dems, and that extraordinary emotional video from Ed Davey, it has had some impact in shaping discourse around social care. I mean, Wes Streeting has been forced to talk about it because the Lib Dems have put it so front and centre.
Absolutely. I think one of the oddities about this campaign is that we've all been so transfixed and sort of gobsmacked by the sudden dramatic theatrical rise of Nigel Farage, we have forgot to talk about the Lib Dems. Yeah. We talked more about the Greens across the piece than the Lib Dems. The Greens are going to come back with 1 or 2 MPs. The Lib Dems, a lot. They really matter, and we've underestimated them, I think.
Assuming you're right and the polls are right, they get 50 to 60 seats. Is that a reflection of where the country's at, or is it just disillusionment with the main two parties?
Well, it's more a function of the electoral system. I think part of the reason that we've been talking about reform so much more is because they're polling at around 15, 16, 17, whereas the Lib Dems are further down that scale, but they've got a much more concentrated vote, and also Labour, as you said, Andrew, have moved resources out of Lib Dem target seats, so that's why they're going to have this huge base within Parliament. And as we've discussed before, being the third party matters hugely. It gives you committee spaces, questions at PMQs, media appearance, etc., etc. So you're right, Ed Davey will become this figure of the next Parliament.
I can remember talking to Ed Davey about 6 months ago, and we were throwing at him lots of sort of big national issues, and he wasn't really engaging with them. And then he said, look, you're getting all this wrong. I'm not really thinking about that big national manifesto thing. I'm thinking about how many Conservative seats I can take from them, and nothing else.
I mean, you spoke about the manifesto there, but there's also been a shallowness to this Lib Dem campaign. I know he did this nice video, and I know he's doing a bungee jump, but for me, that doesn't really matter. I think he's injected a frivolity into the campaign that is completely detached from the issues that we should be talking about. I'm so sorry.
So miserable. Right, back to the optimist. Andrew, your argument is we've fundamentally misunderstood Keir Starmer here. You say he's not a great storyteller, but he's a tough old nut. And you speak very favourably of him, actually.
I feel very favourably. I mean, I know him a bit, and you can always be deluded about people you know only a bit, but he does seem to me a genuinely sort of sincere, very, very hard-edged public servant. Mm-hmm. And I think, we end this campaign with almost all the, the wise people across the spectrum agreeing that the Labour government has already failed. It's already been a disaster. On the right, you've got people saying ludicrous things about him going sort of some kind of woke fascism about to be imposed upon the country. He's an elected dictatorship. It's going to be miserable and disastrous. And on the left, you've got the equivalent, he's going to wallow in the blood of slaughtered Palestinian children before taking his call from the CIA. And, he's going to sell the NHS to Peter Mandelson's friends and all of that. And I think the real truth is that he is not a radical. I don't think he's a radical or an ideologue. I don't think he's a socialist. I think he is a centrist who has, in a sense, the same kind of messianic streak that Tony Blair had, but in a different way. His messianic streak is about my destiny, my call is to rebuild the country. It's been smashed to pieces by the Conservatives over the last 14 years, and I want to put us back to the happier country we were before. And that's going to be very, very difficult, and it's going to annoy lots of groups of people around the country in doing it. It's not going to be quietism. It's going to be very, very hard pounding to do that. But I think his vision is, if you like, quite small c conservative. He wants to put us back to the happier place we used to be.
His personal integrity has taken a bit of a bashing, hasn't it, during this campaign? But it's striking, actually, that those even who disagree with him politically do talk about him being an honourable man. I mean, there was a really interesting comment from Danny Finkelstein, who, of course, Tory peer, but advises the Conservative Party as well, who said, actually, he's very principled. You can trust him.
Forget my knowledge of him personally, but I've had lots of conversations, including with very right-wing Tories with whom he disagrees completely, who will tell stories of personal kindness and him going out of his way to help people in real trouble, which I can't talk about here because they're very personal stories, but there are too many of them for it to be entire coincidence.
You've talked about, and we're obviously very aware of the difficulties that a Labour government's going to face immediately. And you say he's going to need an energy and a ruthlessness in delivering change. He's going to upset people, isn't he? He's
going to upset lots of people, I think. He's going to upset lots of people who don't want houses built near them in their part of England, who think that house building and property is a big national crisis, but not anywhere near me, please. He's going to upset, I suspect, quite a lot of people living on capital or relying on selling capital, whether second homes or whatever it might be, cars or art or whatever, for their income, because there's going to be increasing capital gains tax. I think in due course is going to upset people who want to cascade their wealth down, not much changed to their children and their children's children. I think there will be inheritance tax changes. I think eventually they will upset people in the south of England because they're going to revalue, eventually, I think, council tax. And it desperately needs revaluation. But the impact of that will be, in effect, a transfer of resources from the richer parts of the south to the Midlands and the north of England and beyond into Wales. And that's absolutely essential, but will offend people. So I think there are lots of big fights to come. And my biggest worry about Keir Starmer and the Labour Party in the course of this campaign is I don't think they have told the stories.
Yeah.
I don't think they have run towards the arguments they really needed to have run towards and won, to give themselves, as it were, the preparation, the rolled ground for what they're going to have to do in office.
I mean, take council tax. They've ruled it out. They've ruled out changes to council tax. They fudged it twice. They ruled it out twice. Yeah, fine. But they have. I mean, capital gains tax as well. They've said they're not going to do that. And then there's still some briefings that suggest that they will equalise them, as we've had for 2-3 years now. So I think you're right, Andrew. I mean, it could go down that way. It could do. Let's say we get 2% growth eventually and they start increasing tax on wealth and they do try and introduce these changes and rebalance the nation a little bit. But we're not really hearing that from them at the moment. I mean, is the argument that it's a function of circumstance? They'll be forced to do it.
You say they've ruled this out. Basically what they say is whenever you ask them a hard question, they go, flibber, flobber, blob, 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 blob.
They have.
That's what they say. I think I'm quoting directly. And on growth, by the way, I think that's a really important point, because there's a very interesting FT Financial Times report recently talking to bond market makers who said that basically because she's got this very austere reputation and as part of her plan, the markets will allow Rachel Reeves, if she so chooses, to borrow more money than they would have allowed Liz Truss to borrow. And actually, there is an opportunity for more money to be borrowed through the National Infrastructure Bank as well. Will Hutton's written about that. And I think, finally, you look around the world, you look what's happening in France, we've talked about that. You look at what's happening in America, we've talked about that. And actually, at least for a period of time, I think Britain, under a sort of centrist Labour government with a big majority, is going to look like a relatively safe haven for investment in international money. And I think a wall of money is coming towards us if we don't squander it.
I want one final blast of optimism, because we've pointed out several times.
Have we not enough?
Freddie, come on. You won't be allowed on if you're so negative. We've pointed out several times that this might be one of the least experienced in terms of political experience incoming parliaments that we've ever seen. But again, you're very positive about the potential intake of Labour MPs coming in and their backgrounds. Can you just... It's really interesting.
If you start to look down the list of likely new MPs, you find inevitably lots of rather eminent journalists. You wouldn't be surprised by that, and lawyers and people who've worked in accountancy and the private sector. And again, it's not surprising, but you feel lots of military people, lots of scientists, prison officer, police officers, senior people from probation service, lots of people from a big, broad sweep of professions and trades and skills across the UK. We have spoken a lot in the past, and I've spoken a lot in the past and written a lot in the past about how we're just simply not getting good enough people into politics. We treat them too badly. And on the basis of the evidence we have now, there is a remarkable wave of bright, energetic, really experienced, interesting people coming into the Parliament, far more than I would have predicted.